What's up, everybody? How's it going? Thanks for listening to the Whatcast. Tonight we're going to touch on a subject we've done in the past, and about a specific place being strange. And we're going to talk about New York, more specifically, Weirdness in Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
How close is that to you, Mike?
It's about, I'd say about 2 hours west of where I live.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I've been there. Like, I've got family that lived there. Actually, I've got a bunch of family members that used to live out there. Most of them have since moved away, but it's a place I go fairly regularly. I've seen a lot of concerts there.
Nice.
I bought one of my pets out there. So it's a place that I visit regularly. I'm pretty familiar with it, and just the weird thing was I found this. The idea for this specific episode came from a tweet that I saw from someone who lived in Rochester that was just kind of making a joke based around local urban legends. And most of them were ones that I had never heard of. So I wanted to look them up. And in looking them up, I'm like, oh man, this would make a pretty fucking good show here. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about, I've got a handful of different cases that I'm going to bring up, ranging from a wizard to a haunting to a potential cryptid and maybe UFO sightings. So I got a bunch of shit. All that happened or is famous in the Rochester area. But I want to start with the urban legend of the Wizard of Mount Hope. And this story it's more of an urban legend, but it is based on some sort of truth, kind of. The story goes that there was a man who's known only as the Wizard, who was found living inside one of the mausoleums in Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester, and that he was doing some sort of magic with the bones inside the mausoleum. This is kind of a well-known urban legend in the area, but I think it's widely thought to be just an urban legend, that there was actually a wizard that lives in the cemetery, but it is based on some reality. Now, when you think of a wizard living in a cemetery doing a spell with bones, like, you're gonna think of, I'm sure most people would think of just some old hermit-looking guy with a beard doing weird spells with bones in the mausoleum. But this isn't exactly what happened. There was an article written in 1993 where there were 6 people who were reported that were arrested trespassing in Mount Hope Cemetery. And there were 5 people specifically who were arrested that snuck into the graveyard to allegedly perform a seance inside the graveyard. And the police had been kind of watching this area of the graveyard because they had discovered a bunch of graffiti on the on gravestones, and most of this was like 5-pointed stars, like a pentagram, or occult circles spray painted on the gravestones. So they were kind of monitoring this area, and this group of teenagers broke in to do a seance in the cemetery, and they ended up getting arrested. But with this story, there was a 6th person who was not associated with these teenagers, who was discovered by the police officers when they were arresting these 5 teenagers, they discovered a man named Melvin Devine who was sleeping inside a mausoleum. And this guy, Melvin Devine, had no identification, and he refused to provide any address, only the name Melvin Devine. And this actually, when they found him, this was only 10 days after the arrest of another man who was caught trying to break into mausoleums and was actually successful at one point. He stole a human skull. So he got arrested, and then 10 days later, this group of teenagers, 5 teenagers, are trying to do a seance in the same area. They get arrested, and then they discover this Melvin Devine character sleeping inside a mausoleum.
Well, something about this graveyard, must have some type of, I mean, at least to Satanists and weirdos, some type of power around it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the deal is with this particular cemetery and why there were so many people that were trying to break in over such a short period of time. But this is thought to be where the urban legend came from. So it's a relatively recent urban legend, the actual event took place in June of 1993. So this is an urban legend that kind of sprung up since then about this wizard who lives inside a mausoleum at Mount Hope and performs necromancy with the bones.
Wow. So he's trying to bring back skeletons and give them shields and shit and headbands.
Yeah, he wants them to fight his war against teenagers trying to do seances.
Against Ashley J. Williams and his retrieval of the Necronomicon.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to remember the 3 words, and if you don't, the Wizard of Mount Hope will send his minions after you. Yeah. So make sure you get the words right. Don't provide a lot of bluster and say you have the words right when you don't really. Repeat them several times before you get to the Necronomicon. I cannot stress this enough. If you don't do that, you're going to have a bad time. But that's just there's nothing really paranormal about it. We just, from time to time on the show, we cover urban legends, and I just thought this was a fun urban legend because it's a necromantic wizard that lives in a mausoleum and is completely made up. It's just based on a dude who got arrested stealing a skull and another dude who was arrested sleeping inside a mausoleum. Probably some poor homeless guy who just needed a place to crash for the night.
Yeah, I thought he'd be unbothered by staying in a mausoleum.
Yeah, and then those damn fool kids come in trying to do a seance. He's like, "You goddamn kids, I'm just trying to sleep here.
Stop trying to raise Satan. I'm taking a nap."
Yeah. If you could leave Satan alone, I'd like to sleep. And then the cops come in and they're like, "Oh, God damn it. Get out of here, you stupid kids." And they're like, "Oh, this door is open on the mausoleum." And they open it and they're like, "Oh my God, it's a wizard." He's like, "I'm not a wizard. I'm just homeless." "What's your name?" "Melvin Devine." "That's a wizard name if I've ever heard one."
"Do you have a dollar?"
And they're not wrong. I mean,
no.
if you're going to be a modern day wizard, there's worse names you can choose than Melvin Devine,
Right.
Like, I hope that after he was arrested, he reevaluated his life and became a stage magician.
Or a porn star?
Or both. A porn star magician.
Holy crap.
Yeah, dude.
I think I found my new calling.
Yeah. He pulls a rabbit out of some girl. It's an amazing trick. Melvin Devine! Yeah, it's not a family-friendly show. So, from there, I would like to, these are all pretty quick, just to kind of set the stage, because they're all just kind of local stories or local legends, but there's this place called the Durand Eastman Park. And this is a place that also houses a area called the White Lady's Castle. And it's the whole park is supposed to be haunted by this white lady who was said to have lived in the Three Lakes Pavilion, which later became known as the White Lady's Castle. But at some point, I guess during her life, this woman, or the apparition, she had a daughter, and she was not married, but she and you know, whenever you hear these ghost stories, and there's always a woman who had a child who was not married. It's always some tragic tale, and that's why she's a ghost. And this is no different. She had a child while not married, and then her boyfriend murdered her and took the child. And so now the ghost roams this area looking for her child. But according to the urban legend, she also seems to be like a protector for women in distress. So if there's any women who are being attacked or accosted in the park, she will show up and try to scare the attackers away. But she is occasionally seen with 2 dogs that will chase trespassers away.
So she's not like a ghost, she's a physical person?
Well, no, it's supposed to be a ghost. Like it's said to be a ghost of a woman who was murdered. But the area itself, I'll have Mateo post some pictures in the show notes, but it's called the White Lady's Castle because what's remaining resembles a castle. It's a old foundation built with like old cobblestones and bricks. And there's a stairway that kind of winds up to this foundation. And it gives it the look of like a foundation from like a castle or an old fort. But what this actually was, it was at one point the foundation of a hotel dining hall. And this was a dining hall that served swimmers that were swimming at the nearby lake, which is Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes. At this point, all that has been torn down, and what's left is the stairs leading up to this stone wall, and then the stone wall itself, which resembles the wall of a castle. But this white lady, it kind of follows the same basic trope of the white lady, you know, the specter of a lady in white that kind of seems to pop up a bunch of times throughout the world, and a lot of times it seems to go with castles, you know, whenever there's a specter of a white lady. But typically these beings are women who were wronged in their life, and which led to their murder. Usually they've got some sort of tragic love story, and this one's no different. She was killed by her boyfriend after giving birth to their daughter. Ooh. But for some reason, she has been spotted all over this park. She's reported most often hovering or floating over this wall. And whenever she's spotted by the dogs, it seems like the dogs chase anyone who gets near to the specter itself. So it's just another local legend. I haven't been able to see any, pictures or video or anything of this, but there are some pictures of the site which look pretty creepy. There's one part that overlooks Lake Erie, but it looks more like a swamp. It's a pretty cool picture. And then there's some pictures of the wall and the stairway. So I'll have those posted in the show notes. There's actually a quick write-up through. Have you heard of Atlas Obscura?
No.
It's like a travel site for like weird places. But they've got a write-up on it. And maybe I'll just link that. They've got some pictures of the place and a brief write-up about it, and actually directions how to get there too. So anyone that's in the central or western New York area that wants to check it out, you can check it out on Atlas Obscura. It's just look up the White Lady's Castle. Rochester, New York.
Yeah, that's one of those good old legends. I love those stories. I think they're still relevant.
Yeah, I do too.
We just grow out of them, but it's cool that they still exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, whenever I hear this stuff, it just takes me back to my childhood and hearing the local legends around here. And I've talked about them on the show before. And the legends that haunted my youth, once I grew up and looked into them, I found that they were all fake, which was a huge disappointment. It was just stories told to me by older kids to scare me. But because the area that I live in has so much history in it, it seemed plausible to me at the time. And to a certain extent, it still seems like it could potentially be plausible. But most of the stuff from when I was a kid, except for the whole Oneida Community Mansion House being haunted, that I think there's more evidence for. I don't think that's just a legend from the area, and I've discussed that when we did the New York hauntings. I believe I got into the story behind the mansion house. But just real quick, I guess I'll run it down. It was like in the late 1800s. It was a utopian society, I guess, kind of like a cult sort of thing, where these groups of I don't want to say families. They were, I guess, married couples decided to become part of this society, but then once the society started, it was all like shared marriages, and the community took care of the children. It wasn't like when you gave birth, you weren't the parents. It was like the community all had a hand in it. So the kids didn't have any specific parents. Men and women didn't have specific husbands and wives. It was like everybody shared everything. And once that community broke up, they kind of started founding the areas surrounding that community, which was the city I grew up in. But the mansion house that was built to house the community still stands to this day, and you can go take tours through it. Just look up the Oneida Community Mansion House if you're curious. But they do tours and everything. But there's a lot of ghost stories surrounding that property. And when I was a kid, I would hear the ghost stories, and some of them are, maybe plausible to this day, and some of them were outright fabrications. Like there was one story about a Native American who had died on the site, and the founder of the Oneida community kicked over his grave and built this wooden gazebo thing over it.
Asshole.
And when I was a kid, it was that just to right out the gate and be clear with this, that was never a thing that happened. It was just a story that was told. And the story goes that if you go into this gazebo and look out the window and say "Lonely Bull" 3 times, that he'll appear. And I remember one time going, and I actually went in there, looked out the window, and I said "Lonely Bull" 3 times. And I saw this guy come out of, like, behind the mansion house, there's a copse of trees and some tall shrubbery. And I saw this guy dressed in, like, tan clothing come out of the shrubbery. And in my head, I just saw this guy in tan clothing, and immediately the tan clothing became like leathers, like, raw leathers that were taken from an animal. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a ghost of Lonely Bull. And I ran the fuck out of there, terrified. And I told my dad about it, and he's like, that never happened. That's not a thing that happened. That is a completely fake and fabricated story. And I'm like, no, I saw his ghost. I swear to God, I saw it. And we used to go back so many times, never saw anything else again. Pretty sure the guy that I saw coming out was just some guy. Like, it wasn't a ghost or anything. It's just, But when you're a kid and you hear these stories, they kind of stick with you. And I think that this white lady and the wizard, I think they're kind of part of this idea of urban legends that kind of just stick around. Maybe there's no real truth behind them. Maybe there's a bit of truth behind it. Maybe it's most likely it's mostly exaggeration, but it seems to be the case here as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. When you were growing up, like, did you have any stories like that in your area?
There was just like, don't go to that house because it's a drug house. There was one legend that there was this park that was a couple blocks from my house, and they said that to not go there at night ever because there was a gang there, and I guess they were like, I don't know, into the occult shit. I don't know. That from what I was told, they were men. They weren't teenagers, but they said they hung some dude by his balls from a tree there once.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, but that's pretty much
Wow.
it. That was like the height of like all like my paranormal experiences. So I was worried about that shit, not any legends or stories.
Yeah, I guess when you're living the shit, the stories don't really matter all that much. You're like, fuck that story. I'm living the shit, man.
Did I ever tell you the story about the surfer dude, our neighbor's son?
No.
That like around that time when I was young, that's one thing that happened I remember, and it was pretty close to where that park was, so I guess it's the same area. But I remember being young and seeing somebody go onto this lady's property, and she had like a chain link fence around her front yard with a little gate on the side that let you into the front yard, not like to the side of the house or anything. And as I looked and I saw him, he was already like, walking along this fence to get to the gate. And when he opened the gate, he had no lower half. And then he like the whole time he looked like his shirt was pale, his hair looked white, like he looked like an apparition. But I think I was a little bit too young to like really grasp that and understand that. But when he opened the gate and walked through it, he had no lower half. And I found it strange. And I remember drawing it as a little kid. And my mom saw it and she goes, hey, what's that? And I told her the story, and she found that interesting. Like I said, she's had a long history with all that stuff and experiencing that stuff. And she ended up, we knew the neighbor. I drew the guy's face. I saw his face. And my mom ended up talking to her about it. And she said that she had a son who was a surfer who was bitten and killed by a shark. I don't know if he was bitten in half or they eventually just ate him apart and they found him all chewed up or anything like that. But that, like, to me became a legend in my mind. That's the house where the ghost surfer lived.
Wow, that's crazy. The ghost surfer.
I can still see that drawing as clear as the day I drew it. But to me, it was goofy, like the ghost surfer. So I just kind of chuckled it off and just waited to see if anybody had seen, hear of anybody seeing anything like that. And nothing that I remember.
I kind of want to do a ghost surfer song now.
Oh, shit. I'm actually guitar shopping, so that might happen.
You're guitar shopping again?
Yes, sir. I got bit by the bug. I've been saving my money, so like I don't know. My wife's very good with my money, so like I asked her how much I had saved from here and there, and when she told me, I was like, "Fuck this! I'm getting a guitar."
Nice. Well, guys, look. I guess look out for a ghost surfer song.
Yeah,
in the future.
I can get to writing now, but I want to record it with that new one. But I don't know. Slim pickings, man. Slim pickings right now.
Is it?
Yeah, I can pretty much grab like any mid-tier guitar I want, and there's not one I'd pick.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. I waited like over a year for the one I do have. So
yeah, I remember.
You remember that?
And didn't you have to wait a while for the bass too?
No, I had to wait a little while. It was a new finish on it, but and then my hollow body, they had in stock. But do you remember that one that was black that faded to red? It was a toss up between the one I had. I waited a year for it. They still haven't gotten it.
Wow,
yeah,
really?
I was like, fuck you guys.
That's crazy.
The first one I went to grab, I was all do. It said more on order. Fuck your mother.
Well, that's just unacceptable. But that's like everything these days, though, man. Like even common shit is hard to come by in some places.
Oh yeah, there's places still not getting baby formula, if you can believe that.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Terrifying situation to be in, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, man. Like, even I knew my brother-in-law is, well, a while ago he was trying to get this truck. He ordered it a year in advance, and like he ordered it before it was available for people to buy. Like he pre-ordered it or whatever. I don't know what the fuck you do. I've never bought a brand new vehicle, but he was buying this brand new truck, and he ordered it, had everything, basically custom for exactly what he wanted, and he had to wait over a year before it was even available. A year after the vehicle was released to the public, he had to fucking wait. And it's not like it's like a fucking Lamborghini. It was a Chevy truck, Chevy truck. And they couldn't get it for him despite the fact that he ordered a year in advance because the demand was too high and they just didn't have enough to go around because of the fucking all the shipping bullshit.
Yeah. Yikes, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. But this isn't a podcast about goods and services.
Little casting what slipped into there. Sorry about that, guys. That's out everywhere, by the way. That I got.
Hold on a second.
Problem.
All right. I don't know. I heard some sort of scratching, scraping noise, and I could not identify what it was.
Ooh.
I thought maybe one of my cats got into the basement, but that wasn't the case. So I have no idea what that was. Definitely was not a lizard.
Lonely Bull, dude.
Lonely Bull. He heard me say his name. He's coming for me. He's going to fucking decapitate me.
No. With his leather tunic.
Yeah. And his tomahawk. Because that was part of the story. He had a tomahawk.
Nice.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So I've got a couple more things about Rochester that I did want to talk about, but there's a couple. I don't really have a lot of details because this is just like kind of classic haunting stuff, but there's two museums in Rochester that are said to be haunted. One being the George Eastman Museum, which is the oldest photography museum in the world. And it houses the world's oldest public film archives as well. But the museum itself opened for business in 1949, but the property itself that the museum rests on was built in 1905, and it was the residence of George Eastman, who was the founder of the Eastman Kodak Company. So it would make sense that this was the oldest photography museum in the world. But George Eastman actually died in the house, and it's said that his body haunts the property today. And the people who work at the museum joke that he's keeping an eye on his property to make sure that it's in good hands. But basically, it's just said that there's an apparition that appears on the property, and that apparition is associated with George Eastman. So, but nobody really knows for sure, obviously, because you can't talk to a fucking ghost. But the other museum is the Valentine Museum, which is actually in the suburbs of Rochester. But it was originally a private home that was built by a man named Levi Valentine back in 1879. But it's a museum. It had been turned into a museum now, and it's claimed that this particular museum has become inhabited by a number of different spirits. But people who work there, or mainly the people that work at the museum, have described weird things that happen in the building, including tools being moved around, noises coming from the basement. There's an old-fashioned music box that's in this building that plays on its own even when nobody touches it. There have been a bunch of EVPs recorded, but we've discussed EVPs before on the show, and we, based on our opinion, they're bullshit. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. Just we believe that it's likely bullshit in most cases. But there have also been shadowy apparitions that appear on the property, specifically inside the museum. So it's just, classic haunting shit. Nothing that really stands out. But there's just, I feel like a lot of these cities, and I don't know if this is the case in the newer states, like New York, it's one of the original 13 colonies, so there's a lot of history. And I know, the further west you go, it's not that there's not history there. I mean, there's the fucking Wild West and all that shit, but it's just not as old, I guess. And I don't know if that has something to do with it, but there's a lot of things that, a lot of hauntings, a lot of weird stuff that seems to happen. And especially in these, bigger cities. Rochester is one of the bigger cities in New York State for anyone who's never heard of it. But there's just tons of different haunted places. There's a place, I've actually been to a concert there, called the Auditorium Theater. And it's, originally it was built as a Masonic temple, and it shows like Broadway shows and concerts and things like that. But, it's considered to be one of the more haunted places in Rochester, and there's lots of ghosts that are seen in the theater itself. There's a older man in a red coat that appears in the theater lobby. There's an old man who hangs around backstage, and things get moved around the venue without anybody having an explanation for it. And there's also voices that are heard inside the venue, coming from nowhere, seemingly. There's also another concert venue in Rochester that's supposed to be haunted that I actually just went to last year. I went there twice. I went to a concert there, and then there was a reptile expo there. And I bought an axolotl, so one of my pets
nice
were purchased there. But it's called the Main Street Armory, and it was originally built by the United States Army in 1905 with the intention of using it as a training center and a place to process soldiers who were enlisting for the first time. And it remained in that function until 1990, when it finally closed, and then just sat vacant for years. And then in the mid-2000s, it opened again as a live music venue. And once it reopened as a music venue, people reported seeing these apparitions in the building, along with objects that would move on their own, strange noises, shadow figures, things like that. And it's supposed to be so well known that there were actually there's been paranormal investigators that have investigated this, and it's also been on one of the ghost hunting shows. I can't remember which one though, so I apologize, but it has been the subject of one of these ghost hunting TV shows.
So it's legit.
Yeah, if it's on a ghost hunting TV show, it's legit. But there's, so we've talked about hauntings primarily here, in addition to a fucking wizard, but mostly hauntings. But I want to get into something that's a little weirder, but also not as weird. It's weird because I guess I'll just get into it. I can't really preface this with, with anything, that's really gonna do this any justice, but so there's this thing that is called the Rochester Rat Dog. And this is a thing that had been cited repeatedly by this woman named Gwen Bird and her family in her home in Rochester.
In her home?
Ew. Yeah. So she has said that this this rat dog creature shows up inside her home, and that she's afraid to go into certain parts of her home because she's afraid that she's going to run into this creature. She says that the rat dog itself likely has dug tunnels under her house and into her walls, and she's seen it actually crawl into a tunnel under her house. But she said the tunnels do not run the full extent of her property, just parts of her property and parts of her house. But Gwen, for some reason, is terrified of this thing and feels that it poses a threat for her. So after 2 years of experiencing this creature, finally her granddaughter was able to get a picture of it. So there is actually a picture of this thing outside of the house. And to me, it looks like a hairless groundhog. But this is just based on one picture. It's described as being a large, hairless, rodent-like creature that's covered in wrinkled skin. And while it burrows all through the house, Gwen Bird has filled in the holes every time she finds one. But it continues to build new tunnels and new holes. So she took a picture of it. Well, her granddaughter took a picture of it, and she ended up sending it to the associate professor of biology at the University of Rochester, and her name is Vera Gorbanova. And once Vera Gorbanova reviewed the picture that was sent to her, she said that she was very puzzled by the animal in the picture, and she showed it to her colleagues, who are also very puzzled by it. They do agree that it looks like a large rodent, but based on the picture, they can't identify what it is. So Vera Gorbanova actually went to Gwen Bird's house, hoping that she could witness this creature or, figure out what this could be, find some more evidence. But while she was there, she wasn't able to find anything. She did see the holes that were made, and based on the fact that she saw these holes in the tunnels and the picture, she believes that this is an actual thing. What she doesn't know, if this is a new species or if it's a mutation of a species, nobody that is in her department seems to know what it is. Like I said, the picture itself looks like a hairless groundhog, but Gwen Bird and her family that have witnessed this thing say it doesn't move like a groundhog, and it doesn't move like a squirrel. And the creature itself also seems to be fearless. When it's encountered, it doesn't run, and it just kind of stands its ground, and it freaks Gwen out so that she's the one that leaves. And this is something, it only shows up on this house on Flora Street in Rochester, New York. So I'm going to post a picture of it as well. I don't know if you guys have any ideas, we would love to hear about it. To me, it looks like a hairless groundhog, or maybe it's weird because in the picture you can't really tell what sort of tail it has. So maybe it's like a overlarge hairless rat, but it definitely, like, it's definitely hairless, but it 100% looks like a rodent. I don't know what to make of it, but it's known as the Rochester rat dog. So I don't know. Is it a cryptid? Is it a mutant?
Right.
Is it just is it chupacabra? Because, anything with mange is a chupacabra. So
yep,
it's a chupacabra rat. That's what it is. And that's another song, the chupacabra. We're just going to do a whole album based on this episode. Rochester Weirdness, the album. And we'll go on a full tour of Rochester and only play in the haunted venues. Because that's the way we do it. Haunted venues only. But in addition to all this weirdness, there's been, I wanted to see, because I was curious where, we've got urban legends, we've got all these hauntings, we've got a fucking rodent dog thing. So I wanted to look up and see if there were any UFO sightings in the area. And I was able to find a few within the past 10 years or so. One of them was at the local AAA Rochester baseball game. This one, I did some research on it, and it looks... So the person that's filming is filming the game, and then they kind of look up in the sky, and you see what looks like a triangular-shaped craft with these big lights on it. And he films it for a brief, probably 4 or 5 seconds, and then moves on. I did some research on it, and that one was determined to have been a drone that was filmed. I think that one was in 2017. And it was determined that what was filmed there was a drone. But there have been other sightings. There was one I found. It's this weird kind of white, almost translucent orb in the sky. I think it's likely a weather balloon. It really looks like one. I don't want to say for certain that's what it is, but that's what it looks like to me. But I did find one in particular that it was very interesting in the way that it was described. So this one happened on June 4th, 2011. And it occurred in Rochester while the witness was driving along Highway 390 North. And they were near the Vinage Lane exit when they saw what they said looked like a triangular-shaped fireball. So not really a fireball if it's triangle, but they said when they first saw it, they thought that it was an airplane that caught on fire.
Ooh, shit.
Except for the fact that the object was not moving. So they stopped the car and got out to view the object to try to figure out what it was. Maybe it was a hot air balloon that was in distress. Maybe, there could be a few different things. So they got out. It was stationary in the sky. It just was this triangular shaped, what they said it looked like a bonfire if a bonfire was in a perfect triangle shape. And when they got out to watch it, it was still stationary, but then it started to move straight across the sky. It was going from an easterly direction to the west. And they said it started to move towards their position, and then it moved back. And then they said it just kind of hovered in the area for a few more minutes. They watched it for a total of 10 minutes before it slowly ascended up into the sky. And then once it got higher, it started to move at a faster pace and then took off at a 70-degree angle and eventually went so far away that it just looked like a reddish orange moving star. And then it just disappeared completely.
Whoa. Definite UFO behavior.
Yeah, that's one of the more unique UFO sightings that I've heard. It's, they didn't describe a craft. They said it looked like a triangular shaped bonfire in the sky.
Wow.
So I don't know, man. I do wonder why certain areas seem to have more sightings than others. In looking at our UFO reporting website, it looks like in the past 2 years, there have been over 10 sightings in the area, ranging from a spherical craft to a star-shaped craft. A disc has been sighted, and then one person even described seeing a cone-shaped craft.
Cone?
Yeah.
Definitely not a drone.
Right, yeah. Drones, like if it was a square craft, maybe a drone, but a cone. It's weird. So I don't know. I wonder if maybe because Rochester is a bigger city, you just have more people, so you have more experiences. Maybe that's why. I mean, we've gone over things in all of New York State. Well, I shouldn't say all of New York State, but all over New York State, different areas with hauntings. At some point, I would like to do a New York State UFO episode, but we've done a couple different events that took place in New York State, but there's UFO sightings all over New York State. I've seen several myself that I can't explain, and some of them I've gone over on the show, some of them I have not. But when I talk about UFOs and I see things that I can't explain, I tend to be fairly skeptical. But when I can't explain things, I'm not automatically jumping to the conclusion that it's an alien or that it's a ghost or whatever. But I have seen some weird things that I can't explain. I don't know how to explain it. And that's all I'll say about it is I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was. I can't explain it, and it was in the sky. So, to me, it was, for all intents and purposes, a UFO. But I'm not saying it was necessarily an alien or a jellyfish monster or something like that. I don't know what it is, and that's that. So I don't know. Rochester, it's an old city, it's a big city, and there's a lot of history. So if history we've seen on the show many times, it seems like places with more history seem to have more of paranormal activity, I guess. Not necessarily hauntings or cryptids of any specific variety, but a mix of all this stuff seems to happen. So I wonder if it's just kind of like the history of an area kind of draws the phenomenon to occur. I don't know. I don't really know what to say.
It almost seems like it doesn't just have to be an older place like that. It just seems like all the older places have. It's not just New York. We should probably go through all the 13 colonies and the original 13 colonies and try to find like what matches up with all the reports that we know of. Because I guarantee you, it's all concentrated in those older places for some reason.
Yeah, and I wonder if a lot of it has to do with the way the natives were treated in the area when the settlers came in. I mean, I know I feel like it's a dead horse at this point, but the Skinwalker Ranch, we know it's got the history with the Native Americans and the Navajo curse. So I wonder if maybe that's got something to do with it, where areas where there was a lot of injustice bestowed upon the natives, if these areas experience more. And we've talked about Mothman a bunch too, with the Curse of Cornstalk,
right? And
how that kind of ties in with the whole Mothman thing. So I'm curious if maybe there's more to it, like when we talked about the Devil's Hole too. Mm-hmm. Same deal. Yeah, I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff going on in Rochester, and again, I'm not saying Rochester is like the paranormal capital of New York at all. It just, I came across these things and I just thought that it would be a good idea to do an episode concentrating solely on the weirdness in and around Rochester. But I could realistically do this for any number of big cities in New York State. They've all got stories of hauntings and UFOs. I mean, there was a UFO flap in my area, I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago. And I actually I had a sighting during that time period. It was over the summer. And there were a lot, like they had news articles about it. They were interviewing locals about their sightings. I don't know what it was, but for some reason, just over that summer, there were a lot of sightings of UFOs and then they just kind of went away. It's weird.
The Satanists were calling them, and the graveyards where wizards dwell.
Yeah. The wizards are summoning the UFOs for Satan.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.